Parenting a PDA autistic child can put enormous amount of pressure on parents to stay calm all the time. We have all learned that our nervous system regulates our child's nervous system, and that message is true. But many parents walk away from the idea that believing that regulation means being calm and perfectly composed no matter what. And when we can't do that, which is often with our kids, we feel like we're failing. But what if real regulation doesn't actually look calm all the time? What if real regulation sometimes looks messy? What if regulation isn't about being perfectly calm, but about being able to feel and work with the big, intense sensations and emotions moving through your body? Something that often doesn't look calm or composed at all. What if some of the most powerful moments of regulation our children learn from us are moments when they see us navigating those big feelings in real time? So, in this episode, I want to talk to you about the enormous pressure that many parents of PDA autistic and hypersensitive children feel to be perfectly calm, and why regulation in parenting often looks much messier than we expect, and why we may need to just give ourselves permission to let it be messy. So let's begin. For years, I carried an invisible pressure inside me, okay? The pressure to be this perfect, calm parent. When my son was younger, I was learning everything I could about attachment, trauma-informed parenting, nervous system regulation, co-regulation, and peaceful parenting, okay? Things that all of my clients come to me learning as well, okay? And with every new thing that I learned, I felt the stakes rising because the message I absorbed, even though it came from thoughtful and well-intentioned places, sounded something like this. Your child's nervous system learns safety through your nervous system. And for a child like mine, hypersensitive, deeply reactive, and later identified as having PDA and OCD, that message felt enormous. Okay, it felt like his future depended on me getting this right. If I could stay calm, then maybe he would feel safe. If I could stay regulated, then maybe he would learn to regulate himself. If I could be the steady, grounded nervous system he needed, then maybe he would be okay. But there was another side to this belief that I didn't fully understand at the time. Because if his ability to feel safe depended on my nervous system, then every moment that I wasn't calm felt like failure. Every time I lost patience, every time I raised my voice, every time panic, rage, frustration, grief, or overwhelm rose up in my body, I felt like I was damaging my child. Okay, so what did I do? I tried harder. I tried to be calm through every storm. I tried to hold it all in. I tried to be that parent, the one who stays composed, gentle, and regulated no matter what is happening. Okay, but the harder I tried to be that parent, the more pressure I felt inside. And over time, I began to realize something really important. I had misunderstood what regulation actually is. Okay, so this is the myth. Let's get into the myth that's hurting so many parents, okay? So many parents, especially parents of high needs children, begin to believe that regulation means staying calm all the time, right? We read all these parenting stuff, we read trauma-informed parenting, and that's like the messaging conveyed underneath all of those teachings. Okay, it starts innocently enough, right? We hear that our children need our calm. We hear that co-regulation matters. We hear that our child's nervous system is deeply affected by ours. We hear that our reactions shape the emotional tone of the home. And all of that is true to some degree, okay? But many of us unconsciously turn those truths into pressure. Okay, we start believing that being a regulated parent means staying calm all the time, okay? Hiding our big emotions, never reacting, always responding wisely, and keeping it together, right? Holding it together no matter what. Okay. And when we cannot do that, okay, which is often when parenting a PDA or a highly sensitive child, we think, I'm failing, I'm doing damage, I'm not regulated enough, I'm not a good enough parent. This pressure is especially intense for parents of PDA autistic children, okay, because so much truly does rest on the parent's ability to adapt, to understand, to respond differently. We know our child's nervous system is sensitive. We know accommodations matter. We know co-regulation matters. We know our child can escalate quickly when they sense pressure, control, or threat. Okay, so we try even harder to stay calm. But this is where many parents get into trouble because instead of regulating, they often start suppressing. Okay, so here's what many parents accidentally do instead, right? When you believe you must be calm all the time, you often begin clamping down on your natural nervous system responses. Okay, you push down the anger and the fear and frustration and the panic and the sadness and the helplessness. Okay, you push it down. You recruit the social engagement behaviors to appear calm on the outside. Okay, you try to sound steady. Okay, you try to look reasonable. You try to keep the lid on. Okay, and from the outside, it may even look like regulation. But inside your body, your nervous system can still be flooded with activation. Okay, the fight or flight energy has not disappeared. It has simply been pushed down or clamped down on. Okay, and this is what is called a functional freeze of what I often or what I often call, and this is what I teach in my class, pretend calm, right? And you're not doing this on purpose, okay? This is very automatic. You appear to be functioning fine on the surface, but underneath there is a lot of activation that you either cannot feel or you are overriding. Okay. And this is one of the big misunderstandings I see in parents who are trying very hard to do this well, especially parents who are moving toward a more accommodation-based, trauma-informed, connected way of parenting. They put enormous pressure on themselves to stay calm, believing that this is what their child needs. And in doing so, that pressure, okay, that they put on themselves, that inadvertently makes them suppress their own nervous system responses over and over again. And when this happens repeatedly, especially in homes where there is chronic intensity, right, with our kids, like repeated triggering, very little recovery time, right? All of that buried activation, it ends up accumulating stress load. And eventually it shows up as burnout, emotional shutdown, resentment, collapse, depression, or explosive reactions, or deep shame. Okay, so this is why so many parents say things like, I tried so hard to stay calm until I suddenly exploded, right? Like I thought I was calm and then suddenly I explode. Or I stay pretty calm and I hold it together, but I feel so exhausted and drained all the time. Okay. And this is not because these parents have failed or that you have failed. It's because your nervous system was never allowed to process what it was carrying, right? So everything that you buried, right? Pushing down all those stress responses doesn't get processed, it gets buried. And the challenge is that many of us assume that this is what regulation is supposed to look like, right? We assume that people who are good at regulating are simply better at holding it all in. We think trauma-informed parenting means suppressing our reactions and appearing calm no matter what is happening inside, because this is the only model that many of us have ever seen of being calm in the storm, right? These are our mental models, our mental maps that our brain carries of what regulation is. But this isn't actually regulation, okay? Real regulation does not come from clamping down on what's happening inside you. It comes from learning how to work with that activation that's happening in your body, okay? And gradually bringing safety and some settling to it. okay? And that can look messy. So here's the shift that we need to make, okay? This is the shift that I want all parents to understand. That real regulation is not about being perfectly calm all the time, okay? Or even like looking so calm on the surface, right? It's about working with what's getting activated inside of you and then bringing safety on board, okay? Space and support, holding space for it, right? Supporting what's getting activated inside, right? So that you do not have to end up dumping it on your child. Okay. So this is some sort of a containment process, but it's not a clamping down process. It's like a holding space process. But sometimes that can look really messy. Okay. So this is very different from perfection, right? Looking perfectly calm on the outside. Which when we try to do that, we end up having more of a neutral face, which is not actually calm. And then our kids react anyways, right? So let's just understand that, yes, sometimes regulation does look calm, right? Sometimes you feel the frustration rising inside, but you have enough capacity that you can settle it fairly quickly and stay connected, okay? Or the triggering is not as big. And of course, that is wonderful when that happens, right? But many parents, especially parents of high needs children, assume that this should be the norm all the time. But it often is not. Okay. And when you live with chronic activation, frequent triggering, little downtime, and a lot of accumulated stress, right? And then your own unresolved trauma history being activated again and again, then regulation may look much messier than that. It may look like tears in your eyes while you are trying to stay present. It may look like feeling rage move through your body while you breathe and stomp your feet and push against the wall or make a deep sound to, like what I do, like the voo, to help the activation move. Okay. It may look like saying to your child, oh, this is a big feeling in my body right now, and it's not your fault, and I'm working with it. I'm bringing safety to it. Okay. It may look like asking your spouse for support or to take over because you are right on the edge. Okay. It may look like feeling panicky, overwhelmed, or flooded, but still trying to bring safety on board and not act from that activation in a harmful way. Okay. In other words, regulation isn't the absence of this activation. Okay. It is the presence of the activation plus the presence of enough safety, enough awareness, okay, and support and containment to be with and work with that activation rather than acting it out on others. Okay. And this is a very different standard than be calm all the time. Okay. And for many parents, it is much more human and a more truthful standard, right? To apply to yourself. Okay. So let's get into why calm isn't the goal. Okay. Calm isn't the goal. Okay. I know this is like a big one because we feel like calm is the goal, right? And all the marketing. And of course, it's like I put that in my marketing to some degree, but I try to remain as truthful as I can about it, right? What calm isn't the goal. And you know what the goal is? It's capacity. Capacity is the goal. Okay. One of the most important things to understand about nervous system healing is that the goal is not permanent calm all the time, like this perfect ideal way of being. The goal is capacity. Capacity means having enough space inside yourself to feel what you are feeling without immediately collapsing into despair, exploding into rage, or having to shut it all down and not feel. Okay. It means being able to tolerate strong sensations and emotions and intense energy, which gets triggered in all of us. Okay. No shame in that. We're human. But it's about really tolerating this for longer periods of time without being completely overtaken by them. Okay. And this matters because in parenting, especially PDA autistic parenting, you are going to get activated a lot, right? Okay, so it is not realistic to expect yourself to stay calm all the time while living with a child whose nervous system is so easily activated, whose distress may be intense and frequent, and whose needs may require enormous flexibility, accommodation, and emotional labor from you. Okay, so trying to be calm all the time is just not realistic. Okay, trying to build more capacity to work with what arises is. Okay, and capacity means that when something huge gets activated inside of you, you can begin to recognize, okay, this is activation, this is big, this is real, and I can work with it. Okay, maybe not perfectly, maybe not neatly, maybe not calmly, but you can work with it. And that, my friends, is regulation. Okay. And this is the part I especially want parents to understand. Okay. That many parents, okay, they think that it is better for their child to never see their big feelings. I see this across the board. This is what all parents think. Okay. Well, almost all parents. They think the ideal is for their child to only ever see their calm. Okay. They worry that if their child sees their fear or their overwhelm or their rage or tears or shakiness, then this is harming them. But children do not learn regulation from being around robots. Okay. They learn regulation by being around humans who know how to work with their humanity safely. Okay. They learn through their mirror neurons, through the felt experience, through the watching and sensing what we do when big feelings arise. Okay. So they learn when they see that activation can exist and safety can also come on board and be with it. Okay. They learn when they feel that emotions do not have to be denied, hidden, or explosively discharged. And they learn that intensity can be contained, worked with, moved through, and eventually settled. Okay, this is such a different lesson than the lesson of perfect calm. Okay, a perfectly calm parent may look ideal in theory, but in real life, children benefit far more from seeing an adult feel something real and then work with it in a way that is safe enough, honest, embodied, and reparative. Okay, and they learn when they see us do this, they learn that big feelings are survivable. Activation does not automatically mean danger. Okay, emotions can move through the body. A person can get dysregulated and come back. Okay, connection can be repaired. Okay, and safety can coexist with intensity. Okay, so this is nervous system learning. And that is far more useful to a child than the performance of constant calm. Okay, so here's what this can look like in real life. And I'm going to share with you this moment that really brought all of this into focus for me. Okay. I had been working hard for weeks and was already exhausted. And there were all these deadlines. Okay. Pressure, pressure. And pressure for me is hard. Okay. Sometimes I feel like I have certain PDA traits in me too. And pressure is a big one. Okay. And there were many things to get done. Okay. And at the same time, I was trying to be present with my son. And inside me, something was getting triggered, right? Because of the pressure of this dynamic, right? The pressure to get everything done for my work, and then the pressure to be there for my son as well and be more present for my family. Meanwhile, I just wanted to get all this stuff done from work to get it off my plate. And so this is the situation that was occurring. Okay. Eventually I realized what was happening, right? I became aware that, oh, that this pressure I was feeling was activating this old trauma in my nervous system. Okay. Something encoded very early in my life that I haven't fully cleared yet, right? My body started interpreting this pressure as danger. Okay. And I could feel panic rising. Okay. All I needed in that moment when I was feeling this panic coming in, and in that moment, I just needed 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes to like sit and breathe and shut out the world. And, but my son, he could not tolerate that, right? And then, so I was trying to regulate here and I was trying to hold it and contain it, but it was getting bigger. And then my husband, without meaning to, said something and added another layer of pressure on top of me. And suddenly I felt myself tipping. Okay. And then my son felt it too, of course, because he feels everything, right? So then he started escalating. Okay. And everything began to spiral. And in the past, okay, in the past moments like this, because I've had this trauma activated many times in the past, and it hasn't been easy because it's a 1-year-old trauma. It was a near-death experience. It was like it's a really intense trauma in my system, and I've healed aspects of it, but not all of it, okay? So in the past, when this trauma would get triggered, moments like this would often end in rage, collapse, or shame. Okay. For me, like I would end up raging on him and he would end up raging, and then I would collapse into this shame spiral. I would have tormented myself afterwards, convinced that I just damaged my child, right? But this time something different happened. Okay. Even though I felt panicky and overwhelmed, I realized what I needed in that moment. Okay. So I had a lot more awareness on board because I've worked with this before. And I realized in that moment that, okay, I am not going to be able to regulate this on my own. Okay. And in the past, this has happened. And I'm just very honest and open with my son. I tell him, this is not you. This is my old trauma. I'm going to work with it. And, he would often escalate in the past. But then if he sees me working with it, right, then it helps him. It helps him to feel that there's safety on board, that I'm holding it, right? But in this moment, this was really big, and I felt like I couldn't fully contain it. So I asked my husband to help me. Okay. Now, this is not our pattern. This is not our go-to. Okay. This is something we've been trying to change in our family, where we can all like actually help each other in these moments instead of like it all spiraling out of control. So in that moment, I realized, okay, I need help. So I asked my husband, can you sit on the floor? Just sit with your back against the wall, okay? And then I'm gonna sit against you so you can hold me. Okay. I need back support. I need to lean against you because that's gonna help bring me out of this. And co-regulation is the fastest way to become more regulated, right? So usually in the past, like he'd need to be trying to co-regulate my son. And then I would, be trying to regulate this on my own. But in this moment, I don't know, it just called to me like, this is what we need as a family. So my husband did this, okay? He was able to shift. He did this. He started to co-regulate me. And then something shifted, okay? Instead of us working against each other, we became this team. So my son was watching this, right? He was watching this and he saw this co-regulation happening. Okay. He saw my husband supporting me. He saw that even though I was overwhelmed, I was not dumping it on everyone around me, including my husband, which was a past pattern, right? I would just end up, my husband would get mad at me, I would get mad at my husband, right? So, but instead, I asked my husband for what I needed. Okay, so we were supporting each other, and everyone was not dumping on each other. Okay, I was working with what was happening inside of me as I was asking for this support, okay, and getting the support. And slowly, like my system was coming back, and then watching my son, like he slowly began to calm down too. Okay, he came closer, right? Instead of like running around, flailing, throwing things, hitting things, he came closer. He was watching all of this happen. And eventually we were all sitting together on the floor, regulating as a family. Okay, it was not calm. It was not neat. It was not pretty. Okay, not pretty. It was messy, very messy. But guess what? It was deeply healing. Okay, and what struck me afterward was this. So many parents would look at a moment like that and think it was wrong because it was so intense, right? They would think, oh, my child saw too much. My child felt too much. I was too dysregulated. I failed. And then cue shame. Okay, but that was not what I saw in my son afterward. Okay, I did not see trauma. I saw relief. I saw connection. I saw safety. Okay, he was happy. He ended up eating well later, which is a sign that, he didn't take this on as trauma. He felt good, including the next day. Why? Because what he experienced was not me being perfectly calm. What he experienced was us bringing safety, support, and co-regulation into a moment of intensity. Okay, he saw that hard things can happen and we can still come back together. Okay, and that is a powerful nervous system lesson. Okay, so let's just back up a bit and understand like why things can get so big, okay? Because this moment for me was like so big, right? So, and this is the reality of parenting. Past traumas can get so big and intense in the present moment, okay? And part of why parenting can feel so messy is that what gets activated with our children is often not just about the present moment, okay? So much of what gets triggered in us is connected to our past. Okay, so when something in the present resembles any earlier experience in our life of pressure, danger, helplessness, shame, engulfment, rejection, overwhelm, inescapability, right? The nervous system can react as if the past is happening again. And the sensations can feel enormous, right? They can take us over. And not because the present moment objectively warrants that level of alarm, but because the nervous system is responding to this old material. Okay, something in the present feels similar to something in the past, and then the amygdala pulls up that this is a danger. Okay. So in these moments, context matters so much. Okay. So if in the middle of activation, you can begin to remind yourself, oh, this is the past getting stirred up inside of me. That can help create a little more space. Okay. You can say to yourself, okay, this makes sense. This is real, but it is not all about what is happening right now. Okay. I do not have to believe that this feeling means I am in present danger. Okay. That kind of context. Okay. That can help the brain orient. Okay. The brain needs context, choice, connection. The nervous system needs that to feel safe, right? So if we can give it context that, okay, this feels big, have awareness on board, practice being with, right? This is how you develop capacity, and you bring in context that, okay, this is big, okay, but I know what this is. I can hold space for it. I can work with it. I can bring safety to it, right? Then it can help your system come back towards the present moment, and it helps build capacity to be with this. Okay, and often that can be enough to shift you out of total overwhelm and into some form of messy but meaningful regulation. Okay, so working with activation in real life, right? It doesn't always look quiet. I mean, sometimes it does. Sometimes it looks like you're slowing your breath and you're feeling the ground underneath your feet, more of the present moment, or you're softening your jaw, or you're orienting to the room, right? Getting present moment awareness, or you're giving yourself a hug or asking for a hug and co-regulating, right? But other times it can look much more physical, especially when there's so much intense activation rising up inside of you. Then you got to work with it, right? It's not easy to calm it down. You got to work with this energy. So when rage rises in my body, for example, I might make a deep voo sound, right? This is Peter Levine's, Dr. Peter Levine, the founder of somatic experiencing. He does this voo sound. He teaches this voo sound, right? It comes deep from the belly, and it sounds like voo, right? Or I might roar a little bit, like maybe even just quietly roar if my son can't handle it. Or I might stomp my feet a little bit just to get the energy out, or I'll do a full body shakeout, or I'll do this lion's breath, like and get out the anger, right? While I'm like clenching my fists and releasing and doing floor thumps, or I may push against the wall, right? Just to get some of that boundary energy out, right? So these are ways of helping the energy move rather than clamp down on it or explode it outward, right? And at first, my son, he sometimes found this confusing or even a little bit scary, especially because he had earlier experiences of my anger that did not feel safe to him, right? But over time, he began to sense the difference. Okay, he began to see that I could feel big energy in my body and still work with it safely, that I could contain it, redirect it, release it, and return to presence. Okay, so, and that is such an important lesson for children to see, in my opinion. Okay, Not that adults never feel rage or panic or overwhelm, but that adults can learn to work with those intense states and help them. Okay. And this matters so much for those of us who have, gone into burnout because of this parenting experience. So let's just discuss that for a moment here. I think one of the biggest hidden costs of misunderstanding regulation is the toll that it takes on parents. Okay, when parents believe that they must stay calm all the time, then they suppress the fight energy, the flight energy, all the tears and the fears and the frustration that gets inevitably triggered in this messy parenting experience. And then they hold in, right? All of these natural impulses of fight and flight and freeze. They hold in what their body is wanting to process and release. And they clamp down because they think that that is what good parenting requires. Okay. But those responses are meant to move out of the body, not get trapped in it. And when they do not move, when they are repeatedly suppressed day after day, especially in the chronic intensity of parenting a high needs child, then the nervous system starts to break down under the weight of what it is carrying. Okay, this is why so many parents, they end up chronically stressed, burnt out, shut down, resentful, depressed, or physically depleted. Okay, and this is not because they are weak. It is because they have been carrying too much survival energy for too long without enough support, without enough discharge, right? Releasing it from the body, without enough expression or repair or regulation on board to help it to release. So what many parents do not understand is that sensations and emotions can move through the body without being acted out destructively. Okay, you can work with it. Okay, you can allow those sensations and emotions, but you can also have containment and safety around them, right? Work with them, release them, support them. And as I learned to do this more and more, I came out of burnout, right? Which I went into with this experience of trying to be perfect calm. Okay, and then as a result, I ended up having more energy. I felt more alive. I could see more clearly how much I had been suppressing for years in the name of trying to be calm all the time. Okay, so what children actually need from us. Okay, let's just get into this because this is really important. They do not need perfectly calm parents. So maybe we could just like erase that meaning that we've made. Okay, they do not need perfectly calm parents. They need real parents. Okay, they need parents who can show them that big emotions do not have to destroy connection. They need parents who can show them that dysregulation is not the end of the story. Okay, they need parents who can model that it is possible to get activated, to work with what is happening, okay, to seek support, to bring safety on board, and to come back to connection again and again. Okay, they need to see that being human is allowed. Okay, they need to feel that there is room for intensity, repair, and return. And they need to know through experience that regulation is not perfection. Okay, regulation is what happens when we meet what is real with enough safety and support. Okay, so can we give ourselves permission to let it be messy? Huh? Can we? Can we? Okay, this is the question I keep coming back to. Okay, can we let go of the idea that regulation means being calm all the time, right? Because that is just perfectionism in disguise. Can we let go of seeing that messiness is bad, right? Can we stop measuring ourselves against impossible standards that no nervous system, especially not one living under chronic stress and a chronically activated child, could meet consistently? Can we allow ourselves to be human after all? Okay? Because parenting a PDA autistic child is activating. Parenting high needs children is activating. Okay? It is not realistic to expect calm all the time in a life filled with this much intensity. Okay? What matters more is not that you never get activated. What matters more is that your child sees how you work with your activation. Okay, how you come back to yourself, how you find support or give yourself support, how you repair with yourself and with your child, how you reconnect with yourself and with your child, and how you return to that connected self over and over again. Okay, that is the lesson. That is the model. That is regulation. So if you're parenting a hypersensitive high needs child or a PDA child, you are carrying more than most people realize, okay? You are learning, adapting, repairing, and showing up in situations that stretch your nervous system to its limits, okay? You do not have to be perfect. You do not have to be calm all the time. You do not have to hide every big feeling in order to be a safe enough parent. Okay, your child does not need a perfectly calm parent. They need a parent who is willing to work with what gets activated inside them and bring safety, support, honesty, and repair to it. And yes, sometimes that will look messy, okay? But messy does not mean bad. Messy does not mean damaging. Messy may simply mean that something real got activated. And instead of hiding it, suppressing it, or dumping it out, you worked with it. And that may be one of the most powerful things your child can ever learn from you. So if this spoke to you, please comment, please share with others. I'm sure other parents would love to hear this messaging too. Thank you.